Corporal George Paulson, United States Marine Corps, World War II. George is one of my Iwo Jima veterans, featured in my first film on Iwo Jima, and he's one of my heroes. He told a great story of what happened to him on Iwo Jima. George served as a machine gunner with the 28th Marines, which is part of the 5th Marine Division, which landed on Iwo Jima February 19, 1945 with the 4th Marine Division, and then the 3rd Marine Division came in and reserved a couple days later. George was with C Company, 1st Battalion, 1st Platoon. He was a machine gunner, and he tells a great story. He was on the island. The 36-day onslaught lasted until March, but he was wounded, lost his leg, and he tells the story of how he was running, and he felt something, and he felt like he tripped and fell, and his right leg was blown off around the kneecap. And it just tells an amazing story of survival, how he didn't go into shock and he survived that wound and went on to live a full, productive life. But like I said, George is a Marine's Marine. He's one of my heroes, tells one of the best stories I have of Iwo Jima. And folks, if you don't know your history, you need to watch these World War II stories. These are the reason we have our freedoms today and why we're fighting for our freedoms, because of what these men did in World War II. I salute George Paulson. I interviewed him and had the honor of meeting him in Omaha, Nebraska. It was January 16th, 2006. And like I said, he was about 80 years old then. But I think he was born in February. Born in May, and the interview was in January. But I'm just so happy to share it with you today. And I want to thank Chet Howard and Sean Johnson again for allowing me the opportunity to share these stories. Chet and Sean, again, thank you both gentlemen, both supporters of my work, heroes of the faith for me. And I'm just so grateful that I'm able to bring stories like George today because of you guys. So really, I salute you. And I thank you again for your support of my work, the continued support of my work, and our country and our veterans. And we're all in this together, so God bless you guys. Folks, if you'd like to sponsor a story or honor a loved one in your family, there's information in the video description of my videos and in the comment section, or you can go to larrycappetto.com and click on the appropriate links there to help with my work. Voices of History Radio is going strong, so I invite you to listen to that free app download, and you can just listen to it whenever you're on the go, don't have time to watch a video. It's just a great supplement to this channel, and many people being blessed by Voices of History Radio. Folks, that's it for now. Let's honor George Paulson. I know he's looking down from heaven. Like I said, he's a Marine's Marine and one of my favorite stories of all time, one of my heroes of the faith. God bless you.
I was in the 28th Marines, C Company, 1st Battalion, 1st Platoon, C Company.
Okay, C Company.
Yeah.
And what was your rank back in Iwo Jima?
I was a corporal.
Okay. And your title? Your job?
Well, I was a machine gunner. We had a fire team involved in a machine gun crew. You had a machine gunner who usually was a corporal, and the assistant gunner, probably a PFC, and several ammo carriers, depending on the need, but at least 2 ammo carriers at all times. And we had an assault machine gun that was known as a A4 Browning, World War I species. It was a hell of a gun though. It was air-cooled, and it wasn't very heavy. It weighed about 33 pounds, the upper part, and it was manageable to carry with assault troops. And that's why they used this light 30 caliber machine gun, so that we could be with the troops who moved pretty fast. The 30 caliber water-cooled machine guns weighed 116 pounds, and they were mounted on 2 large bicycle wheels. And it was very difficult for those type of guns to stay up with the assault troops, so they were never used, and used only in defense. They were water-cooled guns, and you could fire them constantly because of the water cooling effect it would have on the barrel. Where an assault machine gun, you had to shoot it off in bursts, and you had to watch how many times you fired it, because it would overheat and ruin the rifling, and every third shot going out of the machine gun was incendiary. And you could tell when your barrel went to pieces, the incendiary bullets would fly in all directions, and that meant you had to replace the barrel. And that was a project that took approximately 10 seconds if you was in a hurry and you had an extra barrel.
Yeah. Okay. George, I want you to tell me about the night before the landing. Where were you and what were your thoughts?
I was on a LST 1033, and I was in the first wave, and the first wave was put on LSTs at Saipan. We came off of APAs and put on LSTs because in the tank deck of the LSTs we had what we call LVTs, that's landing vehicle tracked. And we hopped into these, they lowered the bow door, and we went into the ocean and formed the first wave to attack Iwo Jima. That was the procedure.
Was this your first time in combat?
Yes.
Okay. And you're 18, 19?
I was 18 years old.
What are your thoughts the night before, the morning of the landing? Are you nervous? Are you invincible? How do you feel?
Well, at that point in time, we were very highly trained. We had a lot of spirit. We were kind of gung-ho, so to speak. We were really going to attack this island, which was supposed to take about 3 days, according to intelligence. But it didn't turn out that way. It turned out to be a pretty disastrous thing as far as casualties and so on and so forth. I don't know if you're aware of the fact that we lost a man every 45 seconds for 72 consecutive hours. In fact, we lost more people in that time frame than they did at Normandy. And it was really one that I'll never forget. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself and away from your question. We were on this LST, and of course, in the morning before you go ashore, they give you all the good stuff like steak and eggs and anything you want, ice cream, you name it. And our spirits were pretty well. And there's no question about it. Once we got in the LVT and was in the ocean and formed a line and was heading towards the shore, we were all scared to death.
I can imagine. I can only imagine, George. Mm-hmm. So they gave you your breakfast. You got into the LVTs. You're going ashore. What did you know about Iwo Jima before you went there?
Well, probably not very much. As an example, we were in these LVTs in the first wave, the left flank of the waves going into Iwo Jima, right under the base of Mount Suribachi. And when we were supposed to hit the beach, and the LVTs was landing vehicle track, was supposed to carry us inland approximately 200 to 250 yards. Well, that couldn't happen because when we got out of the water and started up on this black sand beach, the LVT couldn't operate. And of course there was a high wall there, the tide was down, and this wall was about 15 foot high. And we had never experienced anything like this black sand. You would sink clear to your knees in it, and you couldn't literally walk up this bank. You had to basically get on your belly and kind of swim up the darn thing till you got up to the top. And then when we went inland a ways, why the ground got a little firmer and rocky, and we had no trouble of walking or running or whatever we had to do.
Now, when you formed that wave and you're heading to shore, you're the first wave.
Yes.
Were the Japanese shooting at you yet?
Well, I'd like to clarify the first wave. There was a echelon of LVTs that were modified and had 75 pack harvesters on them. And they hit the beach in an echelon, or a 45-degree angle, and their objective was to go into the island and get at the base of Mount Suribachi and provide artillery fire into the mountain while we went across. The Iwo Jima at that point was about 1,200 yards wide, the most narrowest part of the island. And of course we landed on the east beach, and we were going from east to west. The mountain was to our left and the main part of the island was to the right. And we never, the LVTs that had these 75s on them never made it to shore. They either were swamped or they got shot out of the water by Japanese artillery. And I would like to make one point. Our LVT Pertinert sunk too. One of the things they did was they surcharged the load of the LVTs with water, extra ammunition, hand grenades, composition 2, anything that was needed to fight. We went ashore in the first wave, and we were supposed to throw the water on the beach and unload this LVT. And sometimes people that loaded these LVTs got a little bit overexcited, or they overloaded them. And when we went off the end of the ramp of this LST, we actually became a submarine for a little while. We did come back, and we just barely cleared the water, and we had to throw a lot of that hand grenades and water out of the LVT in order to stay afloat. Well, I think that that's what happened to the LVTs that were modified with these 75 cannons on them. They just had too many shells put on there, and I don't think, well, I know none of them ever hit the beach, whether they sunk by being overloaded or whether the Jap artillery shot them. And when we hit the beach, it was quiet. There was nothing, it was just absolutely quiet. Our Navy was making more noise than anybody, providing artillery cover. And we jumped out of the LVTs into the water, and we got up over this first bank there, this black sand beach, and we got up onto some firm ground, and in about an hour and a half, we crossed the island. Well, we went across for about 1,000 yards, and we were completely disoriented. Our communications were gone. We lost quite a few of our officers. It was pretty chaotic. As a matter of fact, the first 2 days, we were in a circle of defense. We had no lines or any orderly communication or to exist up there. It was kind of spooky. The second night was really a night that I recall. We were up there in the circle of defense, and of course we were up on the high ground, and we could look down on the beach, and that was the most terrible wreckage you'd ever want to see. After we got inland a ways, where the Japs opened up on the beach, and it was so cluttered with men and machinery that in order to get more men in and more equipment in, they had to blow up some of the ships that were just kind of lobbing around. They didn't have a way to get in, and it was just wall-to-wall machinery down there, and it was really a mess. But second night, I thought was kind of unusual. Iwo Jima, or Mount Suribachi on the west side, is a vertical cliff. I mean, it just goes right straight up and down for approximately 500 feet. And it had a little beach area there at the base that extended out maybe 300 feet, and then you'd run into the ocean. But in that area and around the base of the mountain, the Japs were dug in pretty good. And we were dug in this circle, and I don't know why or how it happened, but a naval ship shined a spotlight way out from the ocean onto the bank of Mount Suribachi, and we were on one side of this light, and the Japs were on the other. And they kind of shouted things about Roosevelt in pidgin English, and we let them know a few things about their emperor, Hirohito. So we had a very interesting night, that second night. That was very interesting.
Well, George, tell me now, you land on the beach, there's nothing really happening, and then the mortar barrage starts, and what about the casualties? What were you seeing and hearing? I mean, what was going on? Your first time in combat, and you start seeing that, what do you do? What are you doing?
Well, it's difficult to explain how you feel about being in combat for the first time. I saw Marines that had their arms shot off, and they picked their arm up and was carrying it, looking for a corpsman to have the corpsman put the arm back on. You see things that are just so unreal and never thought of. I marvel at how much punishment a human body is capable of handling. I saw Marines with their complete shoulder blown off, arm and their shoulder, live for 2 days. It really never had anybody to take you off the island for, I'd say the first 3 or 4 days. It was pretty tough there were some that were evacuated, but not too many.
And so what gets you through a time like that? Your faith in God, your training, or your objective? How do you have any purpose?
I think the faith in God, training. When somebody said, let's go, you went, and it was something perhaps now I'd sure hesitate a little bit. Maybe I wouldn't get up as fast as I did then. But there was no hesitation. We had marvelous training. We had some of the best warriors that I ever served with. They were just great guys. I don't know, perhaps it was because we were so young that we done things that we did do, and took orders and completed missions and stuff that perhaps maybe if you was a little bit older you might hesitate.
So you're a machine gunner.
Yes, sir.
At what point did you set up your machine gun and start shooting? I mean, you're in the caves.
Really never fired a machine gun till we got up about 1,000 yards inland, which took a couple hours, and we set the gun up in this circle of that we provided for our perimeter of defense, and we had several machine guns up there. And at the base of Mount Suribachi, we didn't realize how fortified the island was as far as being underground. They had tunnels. They could walk from one end of that island to the other, and they could come up at wherever they pleased. And they had like concrete pipes, say like 30 inches in diameter, and they would be in a vertical position off the tunnel at the base of the mountain, and the tops were covered with concrete, and it looked like they took a quarter section of the concrete that you take a quarter of a pie and cut it out, and these Japs would jump up and fire at us with Nambus and rifles and knee mortars, and they were positioned so that one covered the other one. And we were kind of frustrated at first as to how to handle it. So when we found these pipes, I call them pipes, we'd put a gun on each pipe and control the fire. And like if we had 3 pipes, we'd put 3 guns on there, and we'd shoot bursts over this opening so the Jap couldn't come up. And then a rifleman would sneak up there and throw a hand grenade in. And that's how we finally developed a method of getting rid of those darn things. It took us a while to figure that out, but when we did, well, we took pretty good care of them then.
Sure. So you've landed. You're on the beach. Did you help secure Mount Suribachi and involved in the flag raising?
I was not involved in the flag raising, but my regiment captured Mount Suribachi, the 28th Marine Regiment, and basically the fighting occurred around the base of the mountain and not at the top. And at the end of the 4th day, we had pretty well knocked out all the enemy fortification and soldiers at the base of the mountain, so there was no one up at the top. And they sent a 40-man patrol up to check it, and they checked it and put up a flag and came down, and then somebody decided they needed a bigger flag up there, and they got a flag off an LST that had beached the 4th day, and they took that up and set it up on a larger pipe that they found on the top, and Joe Rosenthal basically accidentally took this picture, and it was, I guess, the most reproduced picture in the history of the world. I've met Joe Rosenthal, and I talked to him. He's a wonderful man. He's very conservative. He just told me, he says, George, I just flat held that camera up in the air, snapped the trigger, and he says, I sent the film back to, I think, to Saipan to get it developed, and he was associated with the newspaper somewhere or other, and it turned out to be one of the greatest pictures there ever was, I guess, in the history of World War II.
Now, did you see the first flag raising, and were there cheers that went up when it happened?
Oh yeah, in fact, I know Charles Lindbergh real well. He's the last surviving member of the raising of the first flag. And Charlie's a great guy. He was in Guadalcanal and a lot of other actions in the Pacific. He was a heck of a Marine, and but I'll say this, that he got kind of, in a lot of ways, bitter about the second flag raising getting all the credit. And I told him, I said, Charlie, that don't mean nothing. I said, we know who put that first flag up there, and that's what counts. And I said, the second flag raising represents all of the servicemen in World War II. It in the Pacific area, and I said it had nothing to do with politics or anything like that. But I'm sure today he's even a little bitter about it. In fact, he gets a little bit ticked when you talk to him about it.
Let me ask you this question. I think I asked you this in Philadelphia, but tell me as descriptive as you can about the mass that Father Bradley had at the base of Suribachi. I remember you specifically said that. Tell me about this mass and tell me about Father Bradley.
Well, after the flag raising, Father Bradley, who I'm a Orthodox Christian, and during World War II, they didn't recognize Orthodoxy. They had three branches of religion. You either had to be Jewish, Catholic, or Protestant, and I was an Orthodox. And so they decided that I was a Protestant. Well, now they recognize Orthodoxy. But at that point in time, they didn't. And Orthodoxy and Catholicism is practically like and similar. And I attended this Mass with Father Bradley held, and I'll never, ever forget. He was a remarkable guy. At that time, we were kind of, I think it was the fifth day, I'm not sure, but we were in kind of a rest zone, if you can say there was a rest zone on Ewo, and he performed this Mass, and it was one that I'll never, ever forget. As a matter of fact, when we held the reunion here in Omaha in 1976, we had Father Bradley here to be our guest speaker. But he had to go back to his church in New Jersey because a very important person passed on, and it was imperative that he had to be there, so he never spoke for us. But he was a remarkable guy. He carried a .45, which was kind of unusual for a priest, but he was a special person.
Tell me about the Mass. You said you did an unforgettable Mass. What was unforgettable about the Mass, and who attended it?
Well, most of the men in our company and, well, in our battalion was there. I wouldn't say most of them, but I would say at least 50%, if there was that many left at that point in time, were there. And I don't remember exactly what Father Bradley said, but he did repeat the 23rd Psalms, which I had a very poor religious education up to that point in time, and as a matter of fact, I didn't even know what a psalm was. But to this day, I'll never forget the 23rd Psalm, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And we'd all been through some pretty tough times that first 5 days, and we were eager to accept God, to pray for God, to have God help us and perhaps save us. And along comes Father Bradley, and he performed this Mass for us, and it was just stirring. That's really all I can tell you about it.
Was this an incident where there was some Japanese gunfire at this Mass, but he continued the Mass, or is that something else? Is that a different story?
Well, there was some Japanese gunfire, seemed like everywhere at that point in time. You know, you had these people come out of spider holes and tunnels, and you just never knew. I know that morning had an incident happen. I don't know, maybe I'm probably talking too long here, but
you're doing great.
But we had a three-man foxholes because we were pretty concentrated up in that small area, and we had a corpsman in ours and assistant gunner and me, and about daybreak we had one guy watching and two guys supposed to be sleeping, but I don't think I slept for the first 10 days. And we had to, you know, we were all just scared, and this gunner, his name was Weatherholt. He lives in Louisville, Kentucky, and he was watching, and he grabbed me and said, "George," he said, "there's a Jap out there." And I looked up, and boy, he was right as rain. There was a Jap standing right over us with rifle, bayonet attached. He had a poncho on. It had rained, and he had his helmet on, and he was looking at me, and I froze. I literally froze. I couldn't move. It's difficult to explain, but I sat there and I just looked at him. And thank God for our corpsman. He came to his senses, and corpsman carried 45s, and he took both hands and pumped about 4 bullets in a Jap, and probably saved both of our lives. But after we took all these buttons off, you know, and souvenirs and everything, we got brave, started telling everybody how tough we were, and we got this Jap. But when the commotion all died down, why, I asked Weatherholt, I said, well, how come you let that guy get so close? I mean, why didn't you shoot him or throw a hand grenade at him? He said, George, he said, I throwed every hand grenade I had at him. And he says, but you know, it rained last night. And he said, they must have got wet. And I looked at him and I said, now, Weatherholt, that ain't so. So we got up, went out there, and picked every hand grenade he had thrown. It was laying out in the weeds there, and he never pulled a pin on it. He just got excited. So you do things when you're scared that you don't sometimes realize you've done.
Sure. What about the ensuing operation now as the days go by, and then lead me up to the point where you were wounded?
Well, after we secured Mount Suribachi, our regiment went up into the north end and replaced the 27th Regiment up there. And there was some pretty heavy fighting going on. In fact, that's where the real heavy fighting was. And we stayed in the line. We alternated with the 27th. And it was up around area called, well, actually, I don't know the exact area, but it was up north quite a ways. It was near a hill called 362. And of course, as you know, hills are identified by sea level elevations. And if a hill's 362 feet above sea level, well, that's it. That's hill 362. Well, it seemed to me like they had 5 or 6 hill 362s. So when I told a guy that's where I got hit, and later got to look at some military maps, I discovered there was 362A, 362B, 362C. They were just all over the place. So the 3rd Marine Division come in after the 4th or 5th day and got up on the north line, and they were the center. We were the left flank, and the 4th Marine Division was the right flank. And as we progressed north, with this line, we got kind of lost what I was even talking about, but we
Just
run into, actually I know the people in the 3rd Division had casualties at Hill 362, and they wasn't in our area. So then when I looked at these military maps, I finally figured out why. They had all kind of 362 hills. But that was probably, without a doubt, the roughest, the most vicious, the most terrible terrain on this earth. If there's ever a place to fight a war, that was the place to fight it. Of course, there was no cities. There was a couple little villages on Iwo Jima. The rest of it was just the roughest ground you just can't imagine how terrible it was, and how hard it was to take, because they had little ravines and crevices, and of course the island wasn't too old. It was still cooling off. Some places you'd dig down into the ground with a foxhole, and you run into hot earth, and you could actually put a can of sea rations down there and warm them up. And we'd had to look for sticks and grass and weeds and everything else to insulate the bottom of those holes so we could stay in them. Sometimes it got so hot we had to get out of them. And another thought that might be of some interest to somebody, was, I think, the third day they had an air raid. And I'm telling you, I saw tracers up in the sky that a fly couldn't fly through. There was so many ammunition, so much shooting going on. And when you stop to realize that all you was seeing was 1/3 of the bullets that was flying into the air, you know, because only 1 out of 3 were tracers, you can imagine how many bullets was flying in the air. And of course, a 20 caliber machine gun bullet is got one that when it comes into contact with an object, it explodes like a firecracker, and it can injure you pretty severely. We were looking out over the ocean there at the fleet shooting. They were having this air attack, and they were firing all this stuff up at the Japanese airplanes. And we didn't think it was, you know, we thought it was really a kind of a show until those 20s went up in the air and fell down on us like rain. And then it wasn't so funny because it sounded like 4th of July with those 20s hitting the ground and exploding. It was really something.
Tell me about how you were wounded and where you were, what was happening.
Oh, well, we had an area in this 362 hill area, which was quite a ways north. That was the 19th day. And of course, it took 36 days to capture Ewell. I got hit the 19th. And we had a pretty good line set up, east and west. We had Marines, we were on the left flank, the 3rd was in the middle, and the 4th Marine Division was on the right flank. It was our job to advance ahead, and what we would do is usually about 7 o'clock in the morning, we'd take off. And in order to take off, the machine guns would fire heavily into the enemy's lines, and the infantry would take off after we gained fire superiority. And when they'd get up there, there'd be a gun go with the infantry. Sometimes we'd go, sometimes we'd be the firing gun. But we would kind of frog it ahead that way. We would move ahead, and of course the officers wanted the line continuous. They didn't want any open flanks. And we always seemed to get across and into our area at sometimes pretty heavy, had a lot of casualties there. And then when they decided that the flanks were open, that we had to back up, we went across this one place 6 times, and I went across 5, and they carried me back. But the 6th time, they finally stayed over there. They nicknamed it the Death Valley, and they lost a tremendous amount of guys in there. And when I got hit, we were over and made the advancement, and our flanks were not closed, so they decided that we had to back up to the original line, and it was our responsibility to have a field of fire while the rest of the guys got up and went back to the original line. Well, I was up there firing the gun, and then when they got back to the original line, I mean, we're talking about 100 yards here. That's the way Evo was taken. It wasn't taken in miles. It was taken by infantrymen an inch at a time, basically. But in this 100-yard period, or area, I was required to set up a line of fire and run about a 180-degree traverse with the gun, and just shoot and keep everybody down while the other guys went back to the original line. When they got back, then they set up a line of fire, and then I was to get up and run, and I picked the gun up and had it on my shoulder and was running back to the line, and felt like I tripped. And what happened was a heavy machine gun burst hit me right in the knee and tore my right leg off. right at the knee joint. And when I fell into a hole, and I didn't know how bad I was hurt. I didn't really feel very much pain. I could feel there was a lot of blood going on down there, but I never took a look. And about a minute or two later, another Marine jumped in the hole with me. And I said, you know, I says, I'm hitting a leg. I said, how about taking my belt off, my web belt, and putting a tourniquet on my leg. I said, you know, because I know I'm bleeding pretty bad. And he looked down and he says, God, and jumped up and ran away. And I never knew who the guy was, but anything happens when you're scared, like I said. And he ran away, and there I was all by myself in this hole. And so I took a look, and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to die for sure. And I put this belt on, I cinched it up really tight, which was probably a good thing. And we all had combat brandy. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but the frontline troops had a jar of combat brandy, about like a little Listerine jar. And I flipped that out. Here I was 18 years old, never drank very much. And I drank that bottle of combat brandy, and I had 2 canteens of water. And I drank both of those. And I had seen a lot of people die, and I seen a lot of people die from shock. And I was aware of the fact that you can die from an arm wound sometimes if you're in shock, and you can die. I stayed out there. See, we took off at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I probably got hit about noon. And I stayed there till it got dark. And we had a corpsman, his name was Maxie, that had desires to be a ballet dancer. And that's when I knew that to be a ballet dancer, you had to probably be in the finest physical shape of any. Well, there's no sport in the world that compares to your physical requirements to be a ballet dancer. I'm talking about football, basketball, you name it. But to be a ballet dancer, you have to be a remarkable physical specimen. And Maxie wanted to be a ballet dancer, and he used to run around camp squeezing balls in his hands, and he could walk on his hands for a mile. He was just absolutely the best physical man that I ever knew. And that night, he left the lines and crawled up there looking for me. And he started hollering. He said, George, George. And I yelled at him. I said, I'm over here. And he came into the hole, and there was a little piece of skin holding my right leg on. And he took a pair of scissors and snipped that off. And it felt like somebody touched me with a cigarette and burnt me when he cut that little skin off. And he dressed my wound and give me some morphine and give me some more combat brandy. And of course, by then I was drunk. And he throwed me on his back and run me back to the lines like I was a little teddy bear. And he, of course, saved my life. And I went back to the battalion aid station, and the guy says, you want a shot of brandy? And I says, you betcha. I had another shot of brandy, and then I got back to the divisional aid station that they had set up pretty well in the beach area. And they had a pretty good hospital going there. And the doctor came, and he, of course, why I'm really here is that the first whole blood that was ever administered in World War II was done at Iwo Jima. And that was the first time they had whole blood. And I had, a lot of blood when I was back at the divisional hospital, they had four bottles of that blood going into me because I'd practically lost all my blood, and it was cold. They thought, boy, he really had to keep it cold, and they sure did. And there I was, just shivering. I was shaking. I was getting this blood, and then the doctor came to me, and they put a heating pad on me. I don't know where they got it, but they had an electric blanket they put on me, and that helped. And one guy says, "You want some more brandy?" And I says, "You bet." I was really high, and yeah, I had another shot of brandy, and the doctor came to me and he said, "We got to trim the bone because the bones were splintered out from the knee," and he said, "You got to trim that off," and he says, "Then we're going to put you aboard ship." So they couldn't give me sodium pentothal. They had to give me a spinal. And everything was fine until he got that saw out and he started sawing on that bone, you know. I really couldn't feel anything but the vibration and the sound. And there was a rabbi sitting next to me, and he was a great guy. I don't know who he was or ever will know, but he told me he was a Jewish rabbi, and he asked me what religion I had, and I told him I was Orthodox, and he was well aware of Orthodoxy, and he says, "Do you mind if I pray for you?" And I says, "No, I'd appreciate it." And he did, and he was with me when I was getting this leg trimmed up, and the best relief I ever had was he stuck his fingers in my ears when I was having that bone trimmed up a little bit. That really helped. And so I'll never forget that man. He was quite a guy.
George, I'm going to skip ahead to a question
I know
come
it.
back, but for 60 years you've carried around the remembrance, basically, that freedom is not free. There's a price to pay for our freedoms.
Oh,
Can you tell me about the price for freedom?
Well, the price of freedom is for everybody. It's for me, it's for every American, and it's for our country. I don't think any one person gives any more than anyone else to get the price that we so-called say have to pay for freedom. I think freedom is one of the greatest things that this country has. What makes our country great. To me, it's just something that's so precious that I think every American would defend it.
Good. Tell me about, back to Iwo Jima, why did we need Iwo Jima?
Well, of course, at the time we went in, we didn't even know where we were going when we took off from Camp Tarawa. We got aboard APAs, and they told us we was going to someplace, the scuttlebutt, we was going to China. And we got about 2 weeks out of Iwo. From hitting Iwo, they come out with these models of Iwo Jima and showed us the plan and the beach and how we were to attack. And we went over it every day aboard this, especially aboard the LST. They had just regular models of the island. They Mount Suribachi. Of course, the island was built like a pork chop, and it's 3 miles wide and at one point, and 1,200 yards wide at the narrowest, and 5 miles long. And they had this plan, and we pretty well knew what we were going to do, what sector we was going to be in, and so we were informed and told how we were going to capture this island. Of course, nobody ever told us that we was going to run into the opposition that we did.
But why did we need it strategically? What was the importance?
The importance of the island we were told was that at the time they were flying from Tinian into Marianas. They had Air Force bases there at Tinian and Saipan, and it was about a 1,500-mile flight from there to Tokyo. And they had the B-29s in at that point in time, and they were flying, and they were losing a lot of them because they couldn't get fighter escorts. And they needed Iwo Jima as an air base so that they could put their fighter planes on Iwo, and they could take off and join the bombers as they flew over Iwo and protect them, you know, till they got back to Iwo, and then they'd be pretty well in range of returning without any enemy aircraft on them. So that was the reason, and I understand they were 25,000, 30,000 airmen that made emergency landings on Iwo. And we had a B-29 come in. I forget exactly what day it was, but it was a week or two after we were there, and land on one of the Japanese air bases there. I think it was on Motoyama 1 that they landed they couldn't get the wheels down. They made a pancake landing, and that was really something. We weren't too far away from the airfield at the time, and we noticed these airmen got out of the airplane. They didn't catch on fire or anything, but they got out of the airplane, was walking around the airplane, and we thought that, God almighty, they were clean. They had clean clothes. And I know they were very grateful for being able to land there. Of course, the Japs were shooting at them, and then when they found out that we hadn't totally secured the island, why they got into some foxholes and got off that airstrip real quick.
Did you have friends that were wounded or killed on Iwo Jima?
Yes, I had lots of them. Yeah, lots of them. You want to get into casualties? There were 4 men out of our company supported with mortars and guns and infantry. I think amounted to over 250 men. We had 4 men walk off the island. We had 152% casualties. And it was really, we had one guy in the whole company that never got the Purple Heart, and that was the guy that threw those hand grenades out there and never pulled a pin. His name was Weatherholt, and he was a great guy.
Did you ever feel guilty for surviving, or a lot of the guys didn't come back? Did that ever bother you at all?
Oh, no, I'm very grateful for surviving and coming back. I appreciated life. I still appreciate life. And I now have no animosity towards the Japanese or to the service or anything. I'm very grateful that I think probably the best thing that ever happened to me was joining the Marine Corps. I quit school when I was 17 years old in high school. I joined the Marines 3 days after I turned 17. And the Marines, actually, I'd have probably stayed in the Marine Corps if I hadn't got wounded. But I did. I got surveyed and came back home, and through the help of God and a lot of wonderful people, University of Omaha, there was a couple of professors over there that I was very dedicated to my dying day. They're both dead now. But they helped me when right after the war was settled, you could go to school under the GI Bill or Public Law 16, and Public Law 16 gave me more advantages than the GI Bill, so I went to school under Public Law 16 and went to the University of Omaha and took a little test, and they allowed me to go to college. I think they really felt sorry for me at that point in time. But not only did they feel sorry for me, they were very helpful. They helped me. I just feel that I'll never be able to pay them back, and it just I really feel that. You remember in the Vietnam War, a lot of people were against the war, and they had every right to be against a war or any war or whatever they feel. That's the blessing of being in a free country. But what always really griped me more than anything was that when a young man would get up and say, "My God, I can't take 2 years out of my life, out of my schooling, to go into the Army or the military and give 2 years of my life for my country," I say to him, well, you just really are so damn stupid. You don't realize that probably the best education you're ever going to get in your whole life is those 2 years you spend in the military. And after you spend that 2 years in the military and you go back to school, you'll be a much better person, a much better student, and perhaps a much better professional person.
What does Iwo Jima mean to you today?
Well, that's kind of a difficult question. It really, I don't have any animosity towards the Japanese people or towards Iwo Jima or anything. I feel that perhaps in a lot of ways, Iwo Jima was one of the things that made me become a much better person, because it kind of helped me appreciate life and come to know how dear life really and truly is.
That's good, George. Do you think it's important that people remember what happened 60 years ago?
Yes, I'm a great believer of history, and that's one of the things that I feel that our country should make some big improvements on, and that is history. To go back and collect history, write it like it was, don't try to invent it, and teach it to the younger generation. And we can learn so much from history. That is such an important thing for anybody to know or to have the opportunity of learning and seeing what was done 100 years ago. It's very important, I think.
And that's what this is going to be used for.
Well, that's wonderful. I hope that perhaps with your professional ability that you can come up with a real fine documentary that'll be part of history. And history is important. And I don't mean to run around here telling everybody how many Japs you killed or this and that. That's not history.
No.
There's a lot of things happened in World War II that were wrong, a lot of things were right, and a lot of things were bad, and a lot of things were good. But to find out so we don't make some of the mistakes again, that's why history is so important.
I totally agree. One more thing I want to ask you to do that
Sure.
I've asked all the veterans to
Sure.
do, if it's okay with you.
You bet.
I know it's not appropriate sitting down, but if you could, without a cover, I asked all the veterans to give me a salute into the camera. Could you do that for me?
It'd be my pleasure.
Thank you, sir.